The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Captain Sarah Martinez stepped out of the armored vehicle. Her boots hit the dusty ground with purpose, each step measured and deliberate. The other soldiers watched her approach, their eyes following her movements with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She was smaller than most of them, standing barely 5 feet 6 inches tall, but there was something in the way she carried herself that commanded attention. Sarah had earned her place among the elite special forces through years of grueling training and countless missions. Her record spoke for itself. Multiple commendations, successful operations in hostile territories, and a reputation for making impossible shots under pressure. But today was different. Today she would be working alongside the Navy SEALs for the first time, and she knew they were testing her before the real mission began. The SEAL team leader, Commander Jake Thompson, approached her with a firm handshake. His weathered face showed years of combat experience, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had seen too much to be easily impressed. Behind him stood his team, 6 men who had trained together for years, their bond forged through shared dangers and victories. The briefing tent buzzed with activity as maps were spread across tables and equipment was checked one final time. The mission was straightforward on paper but deadly in execution. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target was hiding in a remote mountain compound, surrounded by heavily armed guards and natural barriers that made approach nearly impossible. Traditional assault methods had failed twice before, resulting in casualties and blown covers. Sarah listened carefully as the details unfolded. The compound sat on a cliff face accessible only through a narrow mountain pass that was heavily monitored. Guard towers positioned at strategic points provided overlapping fields of fire, making any ground approach suicidal. Previous teams had tried helicopter insertions, but the altitude and unpredictable mountain weather had made that option too risky. As the planning session continued, Sarah noticed something the others had missed. Her trained eye caught the details in the aerial photographs that revealed a possible solution. The compound's weakness wasn't in its defenses, but in its very strength, the cliff face that protected. It also provided a blind spot that could be exploited by someone with the right skills and equipment. When she quietly mentioned her observation, the room fell silent. Commander Thompson studied the photos again, following her logic step by step. The approach she suggested was dangerous beyond measure, requiring precision that bordered on the impossible. One mistake would mean certain death, and even perfect execution offered no guarantee of success. The team members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from doubt to outright disbelief. They had worked with many specialists before, but none had ever suggested anything quite this audacious. The plan required someone to scale the cliff face in complete darkness, avoid detection by thermal sensors, and position themselves for a shot that would need to be perfect on the first attempt. Sarah remained calm as the discussion grew heated around her. Some team members argued that the plan was too risky, while others questioned whether anyone could actually execute such a mission. She understood their concerns. What she was proposing went beyond normal special operations training and entered the realm of legend. As the debate continued, Sarah stepped outside the tent to clear her thoughts. The mountain air was thin and cold, carrying the scent of pine and snow from the peaks above. She had made similar climbs before, though never under combat conditions and never with so much depending on success. The margins for error were non-existent, and failure would likely mean not just her own death but the failure of a mission that could prevent significant loss of innocent life. When she returned to the tent, the room had grown quiet. Commander Thompson was staring at the photographs with new understanding, his tactical mind working through the possibilities. He looked up at Sarah with something approaching respect in his eyes. The plan was insane, he admitted, but it was also the only option that offered a real chance of success. The nickname came later that evening, as the team prepared their equipment and reviewed the mission timeline one final time. One of the SEALs, watching Sarah methodically check her climbing gear and specialized rifle, muttered something about her being like a falcon, patient, precise, and deadly when the moment was right. The name stuck immediately, spreading through the team with the kind of natural adoption that marked a perfect fit. Sarah accepted the nickname without comment, understanding that it represented a form of acceptance from men who rarely gave their trust easily. She had seen enough combat to know that names like these were earned through action, not words. Tomorrow would determine whether the comparison was accurate or simply wishful thinking, from a team facing an impossible mission with dwindling options. The pre-dawn hours brought a stillness that seemed to hold its breath. Sarah moved through her preparation routine, with the methodical precision of someone whose life depended on getting every detail right. Her equipment lay spread across the table in perfect order, climbing gear tested to its limits, specialized ammunition counted and recounted, and communication devices checked for the third time. The rifle she would carry was no ordinary weapon. Custom-built for extreme long-range precision, it had been modified to her exact specifications over years of field testing. Every component had been selected for reliability under the harshest conditions, from the specialized scope that could maintain accuracy in sub-zero temperatures, to the suppressor designed to minimize both sound and muzzle flash. This weapon was an extension of herself, as familiar as her own heartbeat. Commander Thompson watched her preparations with growing confidence. He had seen many soldiers prepare for missions, but there was something different about the way Sarah approached the task. No wasted motion, no nervous energy, just the calm focus of someone who understood exactly what lay ahead. Her confidence wasn't born from bravado, but from countless hours of training and the hard-won knowledge that came from surviving situations where perfection was the only option. The team's initial skepticism had gradually given way to cautious optimism as they worked through the mission details. Sarah's plan was complex but elegant, using the mountain's own geography against the defenders. The approach would take her up the sheer cliff face during the darkest hours before dawn, timing her arrival at the shooting position to coincide with the guard change when attention would be momentarily divided. Weather reports added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous mission. A storm front was moving through the area, bringing winds that could make climbing treacherous and affect bullet trajectory. But the same weather that made the mission more dangerous also provided cover, masking sounds and creating visual distortions that would help hide her approach. As the team conducted final equipment checks, Sarah shared stories from her previous missions that gradually revealed the depth of her experience. She spoke quietly about operations in Afghanistan, where she had provided overwatch for extraction teams, and missions in hostile territories where a single shot had changed the outcome for entire units. The SEALs listened with growing respect as they realized they were working with someone whose reputation was built on results, not rhetoric. The helicopter insertion would take them to within 5 miles of the target, the closest approach possible without risking detection. From there, the team would move on foot through mountain terrain that was difficult even in daylight. Sarah would separate from the main group 2 miles from the compound, beginning her solo approach while the SEALs moved into position for the extraction phase of the mission. Communication protocols were rehearsed until every team member could execute them perfectly even under stress. Sarah would maintain radio silence during her climb, relying on predetermined timing to coordinate with the team's movements. Once in position, she would have a narrow window to take the shot before the target's security detail realized they were under attack. The weight of responsibility settled on everyone's shoulders as they reviewed the mission timeline one final time. Intelligence indicated that the target was planning to move to a new location within 48 hours, making this their last opportunity to complete the mission. Failure would mean months of lost intelligence work, and the likelihood that future attempts would face even stronger defenses. Sarah's mental preparation was as important as her physical readiness. She visualized every aspect of the climb, from the initial approach to the final shooting position. Years of experience had taught her that mental rehearsal could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. When real-world conditions inevitably differed from the plan, the other team members found themselves drawn to watch her final preparations. Sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary, her movements were economical and precise, every action serving a specific purpose. She tested each piece of equipment not just for function, but for the subtle details that could matter in extreme conditions. The exact tension of climbing ropes, the precise adjustment of scope settings, the comfortable positioning of ammunition pouches. As the departure time approached, Sarah made one final check of her gear arrangement. Everything had to be positioned exactly right for the climb ahead. Too much weight in the wrong places could throw off her balance on the cliff face, while essential equipment needed to be immediately accessible when she reached her shooting position. The margin for error was measured in ounces and inches. Commander Thompson approached her as she finished her preparations, offering final words of encouragement and tactical updates. The target had been confirmed in position, security patterns remained unchanged, and weather conditions were holding steady within acceptable parameters. Everything was as ready as human planning and preparation could make it. The helicopter engines spooled up in the distance, their sound carrying across the compound like a promise of action to come. Sarah shouldered her pack and picked up her rifle, feeling the familiar weight settle into place. The team moved toward the aircraft with purposeful strides, each member focused on the role they would play in the hours ahead. As they boarded the helicopter, Sarah took one last look at the mountain peaks silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. Somewhere among those shadows lay their target, protected by geography and armed guards who believed their position was impregnable. In a few hours, that assumption would be tested by someone they would never see coming. The helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air as it carried the team toward their destination. Below, jagged peaks and deep valleys created a landscape that seemed designed to swallow intruders whole. Sarah sat quietly, her breathing controlled and steady as she mentally reviewed every detail of the climb ahead. The aircraft's instruments showed they were approaching the insertion point, where she would begin the most dangerous solo mission of her career. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets, announcing 5 minutes to touchdown. Sarah checked her gear one final time, ensuring that every piece of equipment was secured for the rough terrain ahead. Her climbing harness felt familiar against her body, the weight distribution perfected through years of training. The rifle strapped to her back was positioned for quick access while maintaining balance during the ascent. Touchdown came with barely a whisper, as the skilled pilot set the aircraft down on a narrow ledge that seemed impossibly small from the air. The team moved out quickly, their boots hitting the rocky ground as they spread into a defensive formation. Within minutes, the helicopter was gone, its sound fading into the mountain silence and leaving them alone in a landscape that felt hostile to human presence. The first 2 miles passed in relative ease as the team moved through established paths between the peaks. Sarah matched their pace effortlessly, her conditioning evident in the steady rhythm of her breathing despite the thin air at altitude. The terrain gradually became more challenging as they approached the separation point, where she would leave the main group and begin her solo approach to the cliff face. Commander Thompson stopped the team at a predetermined waypoint, marked only by GPS coordinates and distinctive rock formations. This was where Sarah would leave them, beginning a journey that would take her through terrain no sane person would attempt in darkness. The SEAL leader checked his watch and confirmed timing with mission control before giving Sarah the go-ahead for her approach. The handshakes were brief but meaningful as the team wished her success. Each man understood that they were sending someone into extreme danger with no backup and no margin for error. Sarah accepted their wishes with quiet confidence, adjusting her pack straps and checking her route one final time before disappearing into the shadows between the rocks. The approach to the cliff base took longer than anticipated as Sarah navigated around unexpected obstacles and security patrols that forced her to take cover multiple times. Her training and stealth movement served her well as she moved like a ghost through terrain that would challenge even experienced mountaineers. Every step was calculated to avoid loose rocks that might give away her position to listening devices positioned around the compound's perimeter. When she finally reached the base of the cliff, Sarah paused to study the rock face in detail. Even with night vision equipment, the scale of the challenge was intimidating. The cliff rose nearly 300 feet at an angle that offered few handholds and no margin for error. One slip would mean certain death, and the sound of falling equipment would alert the guards above to her presence. Beginning the ascent required every skill she had developed over years of specialized training. Each movement had to be perfect, testing handholds carefully before committing her full weight to them. The rock face was treacherous, with sections that crumbled at the slightest touch and others that were slick with moisture from the mountain air. Her progress was measured in feet rather than yards as she worked her way upward through the darkness. Halfway up the cliff, Sarah encountered her first major obstacle. A section of the rock face offered no viable handholds for nearly 20 feet, forcing her to traverse horizontally to find an alternate route. The detour added precious minutes to her climb and pushed her physical endurance to its limits. But abandoning the mission was not an option. Too many lives depended on her success. The specialized equipment she carried proved its worth as she worked through the most challenging sections of the climb. Climbing gear designed for extreme conditions held firm against rock that would have defeated standard equipment. Her rifle remained secure throughout the ascent, its custom mounting system keeping it positioned for quick deployment when she reached her shooting position. As Sarah neared the top of the cliff, she could hear sounds from the compound above, guards talking quietly, equipment being moved, and the subtle noises of a facility trying to maintain operational security while housing a high-value target. She adjusted her approach to avoid the areas with the heaviest activity, working her way toward the shooting position she had identified during mission planning. The final 30 feet of the climb tested every reserve of strength and skill she possessed. The rock face became nearly vertical, forcing her to rely on fingertip holds and precise foot placement to maintain her upward progress. Her breathing remained controlled despite the physical demands, years of conditioning allowing her to perform at peak efficiency even under extreme stress. Reaching the shooting position required one final burst of effort as Sarah pulled herself over the edge of the cliff into a concealed nook among the rocks. The location offered perfect sight lines to the compound, while remaining hidden from the guard towers that dominated the approaches. She had made it to the position exactly on schedule, despite the challenges encountered during the ascent. Setting up her rifle took only minutes, but each adjustment had to be perfect. The shooting position offered no second chances, and environmental factors like wind speed and air density at altitude affected every calculation. Sarah methodically configured her equipment for the shot ahead, knowing that the next phase of the mission would test not just her marksmanship, but her ability to remain calm under the ultimate pressure. The compound spread out below her position like a tactical map come to life. Guard positions were exactly where intelligence reports had placed them, and security patterns matched the briefings she had studied. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but Sarah knew that the real test was yet to come. The target would appear soon, and she would have only one opportunity to complete the mission that had brought her to this deadly perch high above the world. From her concealed position among the rocks, Sarah had a commanding view of the entire compound. The facility sprawled across the mountain plateau like a small fortress, its buildings arranged in a defensive pattern that made approach from any direction extremely difficult. Guard towers positioned at strategic corners provided overlapping fields of fire, while patrol routes ensured that no section of the perimeter went unwatched for more than a few minutes. Through her scope, Sarah could observe the daily rhythms of the compound with crystal clarity. Guards moved with the disciplined precision of well-trained soldiers, their weapons always at ready position and their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The facility's defensive preparations were impressive, clearly designed by someone who understood the realities of modern warfare and the importance of layered security. The target building stood at the center of the compound, its reinforced construction and limited access points marking it as the most secure structure in the facility. Intelligence reports indicated that her objective would appear on the building's balcony during the morning briefing session, a routine that had remained consistent for weeks. The balcony offered the only clear shot available, making timing absolutely critical to mission success. Weather conditions remained within acceptable parameters, though high-altitude winds created variables that Sarah had to factor into her calculations. The thin mountain air affected bullet trajectory in ways that required precise compensation, while the distance to target pushed her equipment to its operational limits. Every environmental factor had to be considered and accounted for in the seconds before taking the shot. As the morning progressed, Sarah maintained her position with the patience of someone trained to wait for the perfect moment. Hours passed with no movement from the target, testing her ability to remain alert and ready despite physical discomfort and the psychological pressure of the mission. Her training had prepared her for exactly this type of endurance challenge, where success depended on maintaining peak performance over extended periods. Radio communications from the SEAL team confirmed that they had reached their positions and were ready for the extraction phase of the mission. Commander Thompson's voice carried the tension that all team members felt as they waited for Sarah to complete her part of the operation. The extraction would be dangerous under the best circumstances, becoming exponentially more difficult if the compound's security forces had time to organize a coordinated response. The first sign of activity came from increased movement around the target building as guards took positions for what appeared to be a security briefing. Sarah adjusted her scope settings and confirmed her range calculations, knowing that the moment of truth was approaching. Everything had to be perfect on the first attempt, as there would be no opportunity for a follow-up shot once her position was compromised. Through her scope, Sarah watched as doors opened and figures emerged onto the balcony. Security personnel took positions first, scanning the surrounding terrain for threats while remaining alert for any signs of danger. Their professional competence was evident in every movement, confirming that this would be no easy target despite the advantage of surprise. When the primary objective finally appeared, Sarah felt her heart rate slow to the controlled rhythm that marked her transition into shooting mode. Years of training had conditioned this response, allowing her to achieve the state of calm focus necessary for extreme precision shooting. The target moved with the confidence of someone who believed himself completely protected by geography and armed guards. The shot window was narrow and would close quickly once the briefing began. Sarah tracked the target's movement through her scope, calculating the precise moment when all variables would align for a successful shot. Wind speed, target position, and security positioning had to converge perfectly to create the opportunity she needed. Environmental conditions shifted slightly as mountain air currents changed direction, requiring last-second adjustments to her aim point. Sarah made the corrections automatically, her muscle memory and training taking over as conscious thought gave way to the instinctive precision that had made her reputation. The target paused at the balcony railing, presenting the clear shot she had been waiting for. The rifle's report was muffled by the suppressor, but still seemed impossibly loud in the mountain silence. Sarah watched through her scope as the shot found its mark with devastating precision, confirming mission success even as chaos erupted throughout the compound below. Guards shouted commands and scrambled for defensive positions, but their response came too late to prevent the mission's primary objective from being achieved. Immediate aftermath brought the dangerous phase Sarah had trained for, but hoped to avoid. Security forces began systematic searches of the surrounding terrain, their movements coordinated and professional despite the surprise of the attack. Radio communications crackled with urgent orders as the compound's defenders attempted to locate and eliminate the threat that had appeared from nowhere. Sarah began her withdrawal from the shooting position with the same methodical precision that had characterized her approach. Every piece of equipment had to be secured for the descent, while her route down the cliff face needed to avoid the areas now under active surveillance. The margin for error had become even smaller, as detection would mean certain death in a crossfire with no escape route available. The compound's response was swift and thorough, with search teams deploying toward the cliff face within minutes of the shot. Sarah could hear their voices echoing off the rock walls as they attempted to locate her position, their efforts hampered by the terrain's complexity and the precision of her original concealment. Every second of delay increased her chances of successful escape. Descending the cliff face under pressure tested every skill Sarah had developed during her military career. The same handholds that had supported her ascent now had to be navigated in reverse, with the added challenge of maintaining silence while security forces searched the area below. Her equipment remained secure despite the urgency of her movement, years of training ensuring that essential gear stayed in place during the rapid descent. Radio communication with the SEAL team confirmed that extraction protocols were in motion, but reaching the pickup point would require Sarah to traverse several miles of mountain terrain, now swarming with hostile forces. The next phase of her escape would test not just her climbing skills but her ability to evade professional soldiers who knew the terrain and were highly motivated to prevent her escape. The descent from the cliff face became a race against time, as search teams spread out across the mountain terrain below. Sarah could hear their coordinated movements echoing off the rock walls, their professional efficiency evident in the systematic way they covered potential escape routes. Every sound carried in the thin mountain air, making stealth movement exponentially more challenging as hostile forces closed in on her position. Reaching the base of the cliff without detection required Sarah to use every concealment technique she had mastered during years of special operations training. She moved between shadows like a ghost, timing her progress to coincide with the natural sounds of the mountain that would mask any noise from her equipment. The rocky terrain that had made her ascent so dangerous now provided crucial cover as she worked her way toward the extraction point, the compound's Security forces had reacted with impressive speed and organization, deploying search teams that demonstrated professional training and intimate knowledge of the local terrain. Their response indicated that this was no ordinary criminal organization, but a well-funded operation with military-grade security protocols. Sarah's mission had clearly disrupted something significant, based on the resources being committed to finding her. Radio communication with the SEAL team had to be kept to absolute minimum to avoid detection by enemy monitoring equipment. Brief coded transmissions confirmed that Commander Thompson and his men were moving toward the extraction point, but they faced their own challenges navigating mountain terrain while avoiding the expanding search operation. The entire team was now operating in hostile territory, with limited support and no backup plan if the primary extraction failed. Sarah's route to the rendezvous point took her through terrain that seemed designed to challenge even experienced mountaineers. Loose scree slopes threatened to cascade down the mountainside at the slightest disturbance, while narrow ridges offered passage but no cover from observation. She moved with calculated precision, choosing paths that provided concealment while maintaining progress toward her objective. The first close encounter with enemy forces came as Sarah crossed an exposed section of mountainside that offered no alternative route. A search team appeared on the ridge above her position, their movements indicating they were following a systematic search pattern that would eventually lead them directly to her location. She pressed herself against the rock face and remained motionless as voices carried across the mountain air above her head. The patrol passed within 50 meters of her position, their conversation revealing details about the search operation that confirmed Sarah's assessment of their professionalism. These were not amateur fighters, but trained soldiers with military discipline and proper equipment for mountain operations. Their leader coordinated the search, with tactical radio procedures that indicated formal military training and experience in similar operations. Moving through the search perimeter required Sarah to employ skills that went beyond basic stealth training. She had to think like her pursuers, anticipating their search patterns and timing her movements to exploit gaps in their coverage. The mountain terrain worked both for and against her, providing concealment while limiting her movement options and forcing her into predictable routes that experienced trackers would recognize. The psychological pressure of being hunted added another layer of challenge to an already dangerous situation. Sarah maintained her calm focus through breathing techniques and mental discipline developed during survival training. But the constant awareness of nearby threats required tremendous energy reserves. Every decision had to be made quickly and accurately, as hesitation could mean capture or death. Weather conditions began to deteriorate as the morning progressed, bringing low clouds that reduced visibility but also provided additional concealment. The mountain air grew thicker with moisture, muffling sounds that might otherwise carry to enemy positions. Sarah recognized the changing weather as an opportunity to increase her pace while maintaining stealth, using the natural camouflage to close distance to the extraction point. A second encounter with search forces came as Sarah navigated around a rocky outcropping that blocked her direct route. Enemy soldiers had positioned themselves to cover likely escape routes, forcing her to take a longer path that added time and distance to her journey. The detour brought her dangerously close to her equipment's weight limits and tested her physical endurance after the demanding cliff climb. Radio contact with the SEAL team brought both good and bad news. Commander Thompson reported that they had reached the extraction point and established a defensive perimeter, but helicopter pickup was delayed due to the same weather conditions that were providing Sarah with concealment. The team would have to hold their position while exposed to potential discovery by search teams that were expanding their operational area. The final approach to the extraction point proved to be the most dangerous phase of Sarah's escape. The terrain funneled movement into predictable corridors that enemy forces had undoubtedly identified and were likely monitoring. She had to time her approach to coincide with patrol schedules while remaining ready to take alternative action if the primary route was compromised. Sarah reached a position within sight of the extraction point, just as the weather situation began to improve, enough for helicopter operations. Through her binoculars, she could see the SEAL team's defensive positions and the landing zone they had prepared for the aircraft. But she could also observe enemy search teams moving closer to the area, their systematic approach bringing them within minutes of discovering the extraction site. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors carried across the mountain valleys, announcing the arrival of their transportation, but also alerting every hostile force in the area to the exact location of the pickup. The aircraft would have only minutes on the ground before enemy forces could organize a coordinated attack on the landing zone. Sarah's final sprint to reach the helicopter would have to be timed perfectly to avoid capture in the open terrain. Around the extraction point, Commander Thompson's voice crackled through her radio with the final approach instructions. The SEAL team had identified enemy movement closing on their position and estimated they had less than 5 minutes before being overrun. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began her final approach, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether the mission ended in successful extraction or catastrophic failure for the entire team. The helicopter's rotors created a thunderous roar that echoed across the mountain valleys. As it descended toward the extraction point, Sarah broke from her concealed position and sprinted across the open ground separating her from the landing zone, her legs driving through the thin mountain air with desperate determination. Behind her, enemy forces converged on the area with professional precision, their pursuit no longer hampered by the need for stealth. Commander Thompson and his SEAL team provided covering fire as hostile soldiers appeared on the ridgelines around the extraction site. Muzzle flashes lit up the mountain slopes like deadly fireflies as both sides engaged in a running firefight that would determine the mission's final outcome. The helicopter pilot held his position despite incoming fire, his skill and courage providing the crucial minutes needed for successful extraction. Sarah reached the aircraft as bullets whined through the air around the landing zone. She dove through the open doorway and immediately took up a firing position to support the SEAL team's withdrawal. Her rifle spoke with deadly precision as she engaged targets that threatened the extraction, each shot calculated to maximum effect despite the chaotic nature of the firefight. The SEAL team executed their withdrawal with textbook precision, each man covering his teammates as they fell back toward the helicopter. Years of training together showed in their movements as they maintained defensive fire while closing distance to the aircraft. Commander Thompson was the last aboard, ensuring that no team member was left behind despite the intensity of enemy fire. The helicopter lifted off, just as enemy forces reached positions that would have made extraction impossible. Sarah watched through the aircraft's windows as the compound and search teams fell away below them, the mountain terrain that had nearly claimed her life now serving as protection from pursuing forces. The mission was complete, but the cost in resources and risk had pushed everyone involved to their absolute limits. During the flight back to base, the SEAL team's attitude toward Sarah underwent a fundamental transformation. What had begun as professional respect evolved into something approaching awe as they fully comprehended what she had accomplished. The nickname Falcon took on new meaning as they realized they had witnessed something extraordinary in the world of special operations. Commander Thompson's after-action report would later describe Sarah's performance as exceptional even by Special Forces standards. The precision shooting under extreme conditions, the successful cliff climb in hostile territory, and the escape through coordinated search efforts represented a combination of skills rarely seen in a single operator. Her actions had saved countless lives by eliminating a threat that conventional approaches had failed to address. The intelligence gathered from the mission's success revealed the full scope of the organization they had disrupted. The target had been coordinating attacks that would have resulted in massive civilian casualties, making Sarah's successful shot a turning point in preventing future terrorist operations. Her individual contribution had strategic implications that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Word of the mission spread through special operations communities with the speed that legendary actions tend to travel. Details were classified, but the essential facts filtered through professional networks where extraordinary performance was recognized and respected. Sarah's reputation grew not through publicity but through the quiet acknowledgement of peers who understood the difficulty of what she had accomplished. The psychological impact on enemy forces proved as significant as the tactical success. The elimination of their leader from an apparently secure position created fear and uncertainty that disrupted operations across multiple cells. The message was clear: nowhere was truly safe from the reach of highly skilled special operations personnel, willing to take extraordinary risks. Sarah's next assignment came with new challenges and higher stakes. but also with the confidence that comes from proven performance under ultimate pressure. The mission in the mountains had tested every aspect of her training and character, revealing reserves of skill and determination that even she had not fully recognized. The Falcon nickname had become more than identification. It represented a standard of excellence that inspired others to push beyond their perceived limitations. The SEAL team requested Sarah for future operations whenever possible, their trust earned through shared danger and mutual respect. Commander Thompson noted in his recommendations that operators of her caliber were rare assets who should be utilized for missions that demanded the highest levels of skill and reliability. The bonds forged during that mountain mission would influence special operations planning for years to come. Years later, training instructors would use Sarah's mountain mission as a case study in advanced special operations techniques. The combination of precision shooting, solo infiltration, and escape under pressure became required study for aspiring Special Forces personnel. Her methods were analyzed and adapted, but the individual performance that made the mission possible remained a benchmark that few could approach. The compound in the mountains was eventually abandoned, its strategic value destroyed along with the organization that had operated there. Local reports spoke of mysterious events that had occurred on the mountain, creating legends among the population about phantom soldiers who could appear and disappear like spirits. These stories grew with each telling, but those who knew the truth understood that some legends were built on very real foundations. Sarah continued her military career with the quiet satisfaction that comes from service performed at the highest level. The mountain mission remained classified, but its impact rippled through the special operations community and beyond. She had proven that individual excellence, properly applied, could change the course of events and save lives on a scale that made personal risk worthwhile. The nickname Falcon stayed with her throughout her career, spoken with the respect reserved for operators who had demonstrated capabilities beyond normal human limitations. But for Sarah, the greatest satisfaction came not from recognition, but from knowing that the mission had succeeded and that her actions had prevented suffering on a massive scale. That knowledge was worth any risk she had taken in the mountains, where legends were born from courage, skill, and unwavering determination to complete the mission regardless of personal cost.